Start with, a rat done bit my sister Nell with Whitey on the moon. Her face and arms began to swell, and Whitey's on the moon. I can't pay no doctor bill, but Whitey's on the moon. 10 years from now, I'll be paying still, while Whitey's on the moon. It's by Gil Scott Heron from 1970. They spend up all our money, yeah, on the rockets in the sky. But they don't have a reason, so they generate a lie. To distract us from the times, there's a hood in every city, yeah, from Compton to Bombay. Yeah, when nobody likes to be there. The system found a way that made them want to stay. That's from Lloyd from 2013. To reflect on it for a bit. My name is Billie Kapoor. I'm from New Zealand, of the tribe Kaitahu. Today, I'm going to be talking about a problem that's affecting us as a space community, the apparent irrelevance of the journey to Matafero, or Mars, the lack of engagement and the growing hostility. I'll do a bit of root cause analysis and I'll present a solution, one that is astounding in its audacity and mouthwatering in its potential. I got into rockets and television young, with Estes rockets in the 80s. My father spliced footage of my brother and I launching rockets into the sky, and the launch and spliced the footage of us launching rockets with the launch and recovery sequences from the movie Space Camp, which is 1984. It's a big deal for a 5-year-old to watch yourself being spliced together with Houston as you launch a tiny rocket. At university, I was browsing books at Borders and came across The Case for Mars. I thought NASA had everything in hand. When I was growing up, I thought NASA's 50,000 of the smartest people in the world. What could they possibly need me for? Turns out NASA's kind of, as we all know, NASA's been kind of stuck for a bit. So I changed my degree to biology and geology and launched an Ansari X Prize team. I did my MBA in my mid-30s after lots of space and TV activity. I studied how to fund impossible projects like LNG facilities in Papua New Guinea. I also discovered something about myself, that I was transgender. I immediately socially transitioned. Then I did an exchange course to Chapel Hill in North Carolina about a month after Trump was inaugurated. Yeah. Sometimes you know about problems, but you don't understand them until they affect you. And it's, some things became suddenly very real to me. The space community has always prided itself on welcoming outsiders, because that's who we were. We're dreamers, inventors, and eccentric financiers. There's a lot of discussion about why settlement, frontier, and colonization are bad words, why we use crewed instead of manned. A lot of it seems unnecessarily hostile or full of rage. In this day and age, all of that is solved, right? Maybe some of us thought that before George Floyd was brought reality into our living rooms. To do root cause analysis, we have to go back quite a bit. The beginning of our current problems start with America being founded as a Christian nation. If that gets tickles up, I don't mean the founders believed in Jesus or the Bible. That's not what the term means. Just lost my everything. What it actually looks at is the doctrine of discovery from 1493, where after Columbus discovers America, the Pope makes a decree that essentially strips all non-Christian peoples and nations of property rights. If one discovers a land inhabited by non-Christian people, the land can be claimed and people killed without moral fault because they're not Christians. That's what it means to found a Christian nation. The USA had over 500 nations and republics before colonization, but none of them counted as people. When James Cook sailed the Endeavour to Tahiti, he and his crew came across waka, which are multi-hull ships that were longer and faster than the Endeavour. They were used to crisscross the Pacific. Samoa was termed the Navigator Islands because of the profound skill of the Polynesian wayfinders who had star charts tattooed on their bodies. Okay? They could sail and navigate by reading currents, clouds, waveforms, stars, and the sun. They were farmers, warriors, and traders. From Hawaii to New Zealand, these cultures were all but wiped out by disease and straight up genocidal actions. They didn't count as people. Yeah, we'll come back to this. The next aspect I want to bring in is Frida Bedi, who was an activist and a nun, a Buddhist in India early last century. When she was 6, her mother sent her to boarding school, and she was enraged. She never understood why her mother would send her away and never let her see home. Until she had a daughter who she also sent to boarding school at age 6, although it broke her heart to send her away because she finally understood her mother's decision. Her daughter was not safe in the home around men or servants at 6. Okay? Women in India don't worry about rape so much as they worry about being gang raped to death. If you Google dragged by her dupatta, a dupatta is a type of scarf. There are just endless stories. Women there and pretty much everywhere really don't count as people. And who counts as people is the core question, changing the answer to it rapidly over the next decade could be the most valuable achievement of a Mars mission. Okay, let's look at that. For All Mankind has to be the most sarcastically named TV show of the past decade. In the show Gordo, it's unfortunately given the task of framing for the audience how the Americans on the moon are the cowboys and the Soviets are the Indians. The Indians are unfortunately killed, but it was inevitable. The outcome's not in question. Nothing wrong happens. This projection of the frontier into space is a throwback to a conquest that was deeply genocidal. Do we need to have that as a model for the future? How we name things is important. Imagine the Japanese going to the moon and naming their moon base Nanjing, right? The show names the moon base Jamestown, which is a name that heralds the death of millions and destructions of nations, languages, and cultures. It's not great pick. Or we could look at the names of the shuttles in the show. Columbia, from Columbus, yeah, not the best. Endeavour, hi Captain Cook again, not great. But in the show, they also have a space shuttle named Kontiki, which is easily the worst of the lot. The Kontiki was a raft built by a Norwegian anthropologist who had a theory that Polynesians couldn't navigate at all, that they built rafts in South America and randomly floated to islands. It's not even a Polynesian name, but it's an Incan one. And this is what they're naming shuttles after, but it's just a show, yeah? George Floyd's death did wake a lot of people up. It was very uncomfortable, but we're all sitting at home watching it. A lot of actors in the space community vowed to change things, to make Black Lives Matter. Now, how was never really articulated. We're doing a bit more representation. It's a lot like inspecting tiles on orbit instead of sorting out the root cause. Coming back to Hawaii, there was recently a huge kerfuffle over the 30-meter telescope and its placement on a particular spot of land. Hawaiians are not anti-science, not anti-astronomy, not anti-navigation or exploration. They're anti-subjugation. Okay. We need to look at what we're actually doing. However, sometimes what we're doing is hard to see until we're shown something different. Also, while we're here, nobody should ever mention the transcontinental railroads in comparison to anything good. Okay, just they're bad. It's not NASA's job to fix these problems or even to explore space. The USA is the world's hegemonic superpower, and NASA, unfortunately for all of us, is a soft power propaganda agency first and foremost. That's their main job. When you understand it, everything that NASA does makes a lot more sense. NASA can only address problems the United government decides to address. SpaceX, other notables, are models of everything good and bad about Silicon Valley. The UAE Mars mission had something like 56% female engineers, but SpaceX has 14%. Like, what's going wrong here? Okay. All the way through, women don't count as people. We can't code, we can't do math, we can't handle stress. No. Every woman engineer I know has been through so much, just so much. Just sit and talk to them sometime. So what can we do to change how the world sees women? What could we do to actually make Black Lives Matter? What can we show people to change who counts as people? I propose a new entrant in the race to Mars, a non-state, non-American team, a team capable of grabbing the attention of the world, a team financed by that attention, a team based in New Zealand, but comprised of women from all over the world, a team whose every step will be open and available in real time, displaying the heroic efforts required to build the complex machinery of spaceflight. Okay. Our team is Arahanna Space, talking about a massive television show about women engineers in New Zealand building spacecraft and racing to be the first to put people on Mars. Something open, engaging, thrilling, horrifying, a real-time documentary, transparent and interactive. I actually mean 12 or a dozen different shows. The same show each week, but remade in a dozen languages, whereas the A story is following the main thread of the week, but the B and C stories follow the local language speakers on the team and tell the stories from their perspective. Okay, so Arabic speakers primarily will be seeing the Arabic-speaking women on the team, and they'll follow the building of the spacecraft, the bending metal, programming, the stand-up debates and meetings, the falling outs, all the other elements that happen to humans working on incredibly difficult engineering problems under time pressure and under the gaze of the world. They'll watch all that through the eyes of the Arabic-speaking women and from their perspective. Yeah. So it doesn't feel like something that's exported. Yeah, the idea is for in that particular show that the Arabic-speaking men watching it find themselves over time cheering for their woman to succeed at this monumental undertaking. And when that happens, they're not able, can't help but say, I always knew the woman could do it, right? It's an emotional argument, an emotional change rather than an intellectual one. I can't explain to you why women count as people. I have to show you. And we have to show women doing what is exclusively the domain of men, and mostly white men. It has to be pervasive in society in the background of social media and television for a decade to become normal. Okay? But the little girls and little boys who grow up with a very different idea, who watch it will grow up with a very different idea of who counts as human. Okay? Let's get a little bit more nerdy. For our mission architecture, I know a lot of people here like mission architectures and talking about them. Mass is what makes things expensive in space. It's the core driver of everything. Making things lighter is exponentially costly. Every time you halve the weight, you double the cost, or worse. Lowering mass is required, and increasing the available mass are sort of the name of the game. So our baseline plan that we're working with is called the 2-Bob plan. We take the vanilla Mars Direct, which is Bob Zubrin's, and scale it up to Sea Dragon scales, which is Bob Truax's. So 120-ton landers, 25 meters in diameter, 12 to 15 meters high. Yeah. Solves a lot of problems on its own, including life support, radiation shielding, science capabilities, etc. And because it's TV funded by so many people groups and so many nations and host broadcasters, we go big. I mean, that's already sounds big, but bigger. 10 ships, 60 crew, half of them geologists, half content creators and missions people. 3 HABs, 3 ERVs, 4 cargo vehicles. That's a lot of living space. It's a lot of content pouring out every day of the mission as well. We have to capture imaginations. This is how we do it. Take a real short detour now into why including non-European worldviews might be worthwhile. And Te Ao Maori, that's the Maori worldview, everything that sounds like a metaphor is often quite literal. Our myths are encoded knowledge, okay, that are constantly tested and updated. They're called puraka, but also the way we live is very simultaneously mythical and grounded. Tribes are called hapu. The land they live on is called whenua. Okay, the earth is papa tuanuku, and the sky ranganui. Now, hapu is also the word for pregnancy, okay, and a whenua is a placenta. So the tribe is connected to Mother Earth by an umbilical that is the land. Our meeting houses have a big face and arms welcome you in. They're literally ancestors. Often female, you enter through the front door and you're safe inside the ancestor's womb. Okay, the buildings actually have spines and ribs, like really, it's a really literal take on the world, and the buildings are painted red. Hawaii is where we traveled from and where our spirits return to die. Okay. So back in the day, before humans, Tani had separated his mother in Papatuanuku and Father Ranganui. He roamed the green forests that covered his mother, seeking the feminine element so he could create humans. Because all the green stuff around us, that's not Mother Nature. That's what Tani created. Mother Nature is the red dirt underneath. Okay. He asked his mother where to look, and she told him to go to her pubic region, okay, at Kurawaka, and find the red clay there. Okay. Tani goes to Kurawaka, finds the red clay, and he forms a woman from the clay and breathes life into her, and she becomes the first human, Hini Ahune. It's part of why our buildings are painted ochre. Okay, all our buildings are red, from the flow of our Mother Earth and our ancestral mothers connecting us all the way back. If we return our eyes to Ranganui, the sky, we must navigate to get to Papatuanuku's sister, Matafera, which is Mars, and her red clay that awaits us. We may or may not return, but our spirits will, for Papatuanuku, will forever be a Hawaii ki. I find that a very compelling vision of why the call to go to Mars and to take the gifts of Tane and Tangaroa is necessary. Okay? Most cultures, though, have these very positive views of life and exploration. Okay? We don't need to be afraid of them. Okay? Everywhere Europeans went, humans are already there. Okay? Lots of people are into exploration. Okay, we can bring these in. If we lean into these things, if we have a show that forefronts, say, Black women and African-American vernacular English, like if we really went for it, what could we accomplish if we just went right out there? Certainly NASA would get all the funding it needed to make sure that NASA isn't upstaged by a gang of third world women. It's not a cutthroat race, but a good-natured, high-stakes sport, tech sport, but one where the underdog is really worth rooting for. Yeah. Down to brass tacks. Didn't Mars One try this? Mars One had a very small scope of who the audience was supposed to be, and they turned out to be adverse to drama, reportedly. Okay. Television's all about drama. If a normal TV person was commentating on a spacewalk, the return to the hatch, which is pretty routine, which would be full of speculation. Will the hatch open? What if a micrometeorite strikes? Big dramatic music, and then relief when the hatch opens and the astronaut's safe. And all the space nerds are saying, like, yeah, that was never going to break. That was going to be fine. Okay, but for television, it has to be dramatic. But for NASA and NASA's suppliers and NASA's customers, nothing can be dramatic. This is why NASA TV tends to put me to sleep, even though I'm very into space and very into TV. Because drama gets your funding cut. Whereas for Arahanna, drama is the source of our funding. So the more drama, the better. Okay, the more we explode things, the worse things get. The worse press we get, the more ratings we get. We have to be willing to look like idiots, to screw up, to learn, to fly, to fail, to cry, to learn to pick ourselves up, to keep going against all odds. That's the soul of good television. The Falcon Heavy launch set streaming records on YouTube, but we don't get to see all the human drama, just the launches. Okay, we miss out on everything else. But what we're doing is a revolution through the spectacle. Okay, people are starving for the spectacle, but we aren't doing anything with it, and we're not really giving it to them as it could. And how do we fund it? Well, the media rights to a global streaming provider could cover it on its own. Certainly, some are sitting on enough raw cash to make massive blush, right? But it depends on who wants to be the platform that solves sexism and racism in our lifetimes. Like actually makes a difference and not just sets up a diversity program or a quota. We'll also be building a completely ITAR-free tech stack, which should be commercially competitive. You can do a lot with a rocket that can throw 25-meter diameter, 500-ton payloads, like from huge telescopes to space stations, right? Things you can't do with anything else. It also becomes very politically difficult to stop us. Like as long as the show is entertaining, it becomes self-funding. It's pure, unstoppable, revolutionary capitalism. It'd be very hard to lean on the New Zealand government to shut us down because we'll have huge international goodwill and so many contracts with it. It's a human right to participate in science. Okay, so people have a human rights reason to be able to watch the show. We also meet a bunch of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Okay, so politically, this is something that's very hard to oppose. We have a completely different product and market segment from the other 120 or so launch providers. So there's no overlap there. So it's a safe investment. This will also be a transmedia show. So weekly on TV, but constantly on the social media, in board games, posters, endless licensed clothing. It is drama first. So yeah, at the hairdressers, there'll be lively debates about the best solution to landing on Mars or why the latest test exploded. But the argument's going to be tribal based on who in the show backs which idea and who likes that person. If you like that person, you're going to go with their engineering. Okay. So yeah, I think the Kardashians go to Mars is sort of where we're at, but meaningful. Rule one is don't be boring. Now, this is a capitalist solution to an ancient human problem. This is a solution to funding a Mars mission and protecting it. This is the solution to getting space on everyone's radar in a positive way. It's the liberal solution, living up to the unfulfilled promise of liberty and justice for all, which starts by changing how we see people and who we unconsciously think of as counting as human. This show isn't in the hands of the government, but in the viewers. Okay, so you guys, with the subscriber-based broadcast ratings, it's up to everyone here to make this work. I'm doing my best with my team to build it, but it is in the hands of everyone here. We need subscribers to our YouTube channel, funding on Patreon, so on. If we can show real interest, we can land large media contracts. We live and die based on fans. So join our Discord, browse our forums, critique our architectures, procedures, go through our code. We want to build a space nerd nirvana, right? So that we can have a sustainable fan base. We're basically proposing what has to be a huge show for a decade. It has to be a big show, okay? On the scale of the Marvel franchise, for reference, okay? It's a big ask, but it can be done. It's been done a couple of times. Shows that big, generating that amount of money to cover their costs. We can do it, but it has to be very engaging and very not boring. And we do that by making it as relevant to as many people as we can. And if we do it, it'll be worthwhile for everybody on Earth right now, like long before we even launch. Long before we launch, it starts to become relevant and important, makes Mars important right now. So even if you think it's the stupidest idea you ever heard, that it can't work, it's not well thought out, it'll be a really great show to watch, right? Yeah, so questions. I'm going to put I have the Discord links and YouTube channels in chat. Did anyone have any particular questions?
If anyone has any questions, they can put it up in the chat section and I can read them out to you and you'll be able to answer. So any questions in the chat box, please?
We have some slides up, just rebooting our website today. So yeah, come along to that. There's a lot of stuff on our YouTube channel at the moment, including music and discussions of architecture and things like that. Other questions?
Okay, so no questions. Okay, I'd like to give our appreciation and we thank you for your talk and we really wish you all the best.
Thanks, everybody.